Helluva Town is a rules-light, early cartoon-themed tabletop RPG published by Acheron, the people who brought you Inferno, Apocalypsa, Lex Arcana, and Broncolonia, all very substantial games that I've covered on this channel. This one is a bit different from Acheron's previous works. The original concept was by Samuel Marola, and I think the illustrator Sean Dickinson deserves a lot of credit because a lot of this game is intensely visual. The game has launched on Kickstarter at the time of this recording, and I'll leave a link down below to where you can get more details and maybe back the project if you want. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the free quick start for the game, and at the end, I'll give you my hopes and my worries and my wish list for this project. The setting of the game is 1930s New York City, but not in any significant or directly historical sense. Tucked away between Little Italy and the Bowery is a secret, magical pocket dimension called Helluva Town. And it's essentially a completely unhinged, rated-R cartoon universe, a quote, circus filled with wild rides, acid trips, perversions, alienation, anarchy, and super weird pimped out weapons on a background of happy-go-lucky tunes and death. Other phrases that jumped out at me were ultra-violent streets, sex, substances, and vices of all kind. If this sort of rings a bell for you, it's because the creator is drawing inspiration from film classics like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a Robert Zemeckis film from 1988 that mixed the animated world and reality through a dark lens, and Ralph Bakshi's Cool World from 1992, which took that whole theme even further. But to fully understand and play in this setting, you have to go even further back and get a feel for the original animation that inspired Roger Rabbit and Cool World. The G-rated Looney Tunes, early Mickey Mouse, Popeye, and Betty Boop. But make no mistake, this game is not G-rated. Weaved into its mechanics is predatory debt and substance abuse. So what is the lay of the city? There is no real map, but there are distinct neighborhoods that you can visit. The whole town is run by a mob family called the Duckos, necessarily to be conflated with a sort of evil Donald Duck family. Hinted at throughout the quick start and later confronted is Jimmy Rat, the most violent and dangerous criminal toon to have ever lived. This would be a stand-in for Mickey Mouse, of course, but completely malevolent. The quick start describes a few of the neighborhoods in town, as well as some flavor text for the half-dozen pre-generated characters that you can download. By the way, this is what a character sheet looks like in this game. This is what I call ultra light. I'll get to the mechanics in a minute. As far as Grin Gardens, this is the home to the theaters and gambling dens. Quote, its sidewalks brimming with betting folks in barrels and suspenders, and legions of street performers swallowing dynamite sticks, jumping through napalm hoops, dancing with tarantulas, or summoning the vindictive spirits of deceased celebrities. This is really evocative, thematic writing. My only problem here is that I'm not sure your average GM could reproduce this caliber of description on the fly. This is well above average in terms of creative writing. Shocktopia is the industrial part of town where the working class toons slave away in factories and warehouses 14 hours a day and spend their nights boozing and whoring in their tenement apartments. If you haven't figured it out yet, you probably don't want to play this game with young kids. Science Expo is a World Fair-like theme park that exhibits visions of the future, but it's more like a monument to the insanity of a mad scientist type character named Dr. Grumpo. Chromed buildings shaped like fins, giant magnetic spools unleashing plasma storms, swarms of flying robots armed with missiles and katanas. All of it, of course, holiday themed. The former molasses factory, now converted into a prison, is called Chorizo Extravagante Penitentiary, of course, and it's run by vegetable security guards like potatoes, cauliflower, and carrots. The train that takes inmates from the prison to the beetroot fields for forced labor is set on a roller coaster with a train car that has a complete personality. If this is all starting to strain your imagination and you like that sensation, then this is the right game for you. I think the challenge is probably finding 3 or 4 other people who also feel the same way. I'm in that camp though. I find these setting details highly entertaining to read, and with some research I could probably flesh out a fun adventure. The quick start, like most quick starts, don't give you character creation tools, but it does hint at the different kinds of character classes you can play. There are beasties, which are animal-themed PCs, boogies, which are supernatural in one way or another, like monsters, cryptids, skeletons, devils, folks, which are roughly human in appearance, and stuff, which is any inanimate item come to life. Each of these types comes with specific tricks, which are like one-off powers that you can use in a combat encounter. As far as the stats for your character, there are 4. Touchy, your strength, endurance, and agility. Feely, your social skills and empathy. Handy, your dexterity and technical knowledge. And a loony, a measure of your silliness and creativity. You kind of have 2 hit point pools in this game. The first is the more obvious track of bonks. After you take 3 bonks, you're tuned out, which doesn't result in death. Actually, toons basically can't die in this universe. Instead, you incur a card draw penalty for a time. The other mechanic that is analogous to hit points is your bucks or money pool. Every toon in Helluva Town is only as good as the amount of money that they have. And when they defeat other toons in combat, they get more bucks. When they lose in combat, they lose bucks. Your pocket is your gear inventory. And as you might imagine, it's basically anything you can think of. I wasn't able to find in the quick start any limitations to this, but I'm sure it's detailed a bit more in the full core rulebook. Anytime a player needs to resolve a combat or other kind of challenge, they're going to, by default, draw 2 cards from their personal poker deck, including jokers. You can use a regular deck, but you'd have to refer to or memorize this chart because each suit has its own special color and stat invoked for that challenge. When you draw those 2 cards, you will add them up together and add your relevant stat. Aces and face cards are 10. If you have a card which matches the stat you've invoked for the challenge, then you add 1 point to your draw sum. Your sum needs to meet or exceed the difficulty number set for the challenge. Combats are called showdowns, and they aren't always necessarily about trading blows. You're encouraged to come up with other ways to defeat an opponent, such as with diplomacy or subterfuge, essentially through any of the 4 core stats. If your draw is successful in an attack, the opponent takes a bonk. If your draw fails to beat the difficulty number, then nothing happens. The GM or animator doesn't actually have their own deck of cards. Instead, the players will draw cards to defend themselves when they get attacked. It's mentioned that PCs and entire parties can always just run away from a showdown, and there doesn't seem to be any card draw required for that. They can just do it. The alternative to running away, if you don't win the battle, is a total party kill or total KO, and that results in all party members becoming indebted to the enemy, and they become branded with their new creditor's logo until they can clear their debt. There are a few more important things about these challenges. One is that your range of difficulty is defined here. In most cases, I think a challenge will range in the 10 to 15 zone. The second thing is that you incur extra bonuses and penalties depending on how much above or below the difficulty number your draw landed. You know, as simplistic as this game's rules are, this is a very sophisticated and welcome dynamic to success and failure in RPGs. I'm seeing it more and more these days, but a lot of games don't account for degrees of success or failure, which can make for some very anticlimactic and disappointing rolls. The final thing about challenges worth mentioning is this illicit substance called raw ink. If your toon character gets a hold of this stuff, either by buying it on the black market or stealing it from someone, and they drink it, their essence gets lit up with vibrant colors and they automatically succeed their next challenge. Additionally, all of their bonks are removed and the player will draw 3 cards on their next challenge instead of 2. If 2 of those 3 cards drawn match in number, color, or face, then the toon escapes the withdrawal symptom of using raw ink. However, if they don't get a match, then the raw ink causes them to be tuned out, in which case on their next draw, they can only draw 1 card instead of 2. This is a pretty dark concept. Cartoons drinking this basically illegal drug to enhance their performance and suffering narcotic-like withdrawal symptoms half the time. The second half of the quick start is a sample introductory adventure called Fly Me to the Moon that starts you off in that chorizo extravagante penitentiary as inmates working the beetroot fields. As you get on the tracks to return to the prison after a long day's work, the train car you're in contains a coffin wrapped in chains. I won't walk you through the whole scenario, but it's broken out into 4 scenes, and each scene is detailed within about 1 page. In the first scene, you have the option of helping a fellow inmate who is getting beat up by 4 potato guards, and around that time, the train is besieged by an army of duckos with dynamite. Long story short, you eventually uncover the still living Jimmy Rat, who is the most dangerous toon to have ever lived. It doesn't even really stat him out for a fight, it's more of a cliffhanger ending. Alright, so here are my thoughts on the Helluva Town Quick Start, dependent on visuals. It would really help if the people you're playing this game with have some knowledge or memory of watching Looney Tunes as a kid, and at a minimum should also probably have seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit as well as Cool World, but also the artwork in this game is necessary since it is the bedrock upon which this crazy concept rests. You can't imagine or play this game without visuals reinforcing the weirdness of it. Some people just won't get it. My guess is that even if you got some folks to watch the movies and maybe some of the old cartoons, you might still not get them into the headspace of this game. Rated R old-timey cartoons, it's not really a new tradition at this point, but it's a relatively obscure one that requires a certain framework of cultural experience and understanding that you may not be able to just front load into new potential players. Entertaining RPG concept. Although the concept is not new, applying it to an RPG is pretty novel. I'm sure someone in the comments will snidely list out previous RPGs that have done this, but at any rate, it's a rare and novel thing to try. One aspect of the setting and general game concept that I really like is how it challenges your imagination. Instead of relying on fantasy or sci-fi or cyberpunk tropes, you're excelling in this game if you're able to verbally conjure up particularly strange and demented imagery. I don't mean that the mechanics reward you for doing that, but I think that's the way the game is intended to be played. Low complexity rules are a perfect fit. The simple card draw mechanics are a perfect fit for this kind of game because everything in the setting is just so fluid and wacky that a more simulationist or crunchy approach would just seem absurd. And like I just mentioned, players and GMs should be spending more of their mental energy on funny, unique descriptions of things rather than sorting out numbers on their character sheets. Artwork so far is immaculate. I appreciate the art in this game so far by Sean Dickinson. Like I said, the art is required for this game to work, and the illustrations in this game strike a perfect feel of nostalgia as seen through a demented lens. I have a list of things that I wish would be included in the final game, none of which I've communicated to the creators or which are based on anything on the campaign page. It's just stuff that I thought of after reading through the quick start a couple times. Tables for generating thematic ideas. This would be really helpful for most people. I can't speak for everyone, but personally, I haven't watched a lot of Looney Tunes or old cartoons lately, so my mental well of ideas for imagery in a session of this game is a little dry. Some tables would help. The more the better. GM tracking sheet. It would be cool to have a printable sheet where GMs can track NPCs or NPTs, non-playable toons, and other elements of a session or campaign. More illicit drugs like raw ink. I thought the mechanics and even the mere concept of raw ink was so good, and it would be great if they included other narcotics or hallucinogens in the game for players to abuse. It would just add to the seediness of the experience. Soundtrack or playlist. Music is a big part of early animation and of evoking the feel of the 1930s. If the creators can't generate original music for this game, the next best thing would be to assemble a playlist that GMs can use during their sessions, like something on Spotify or YouTube. How to draw sections. This is a bit out there, but I think it would be a ton of fun to get maybe a 20-page guide on how to draw basic characters for this setting. It would empower players to be more invested in their toon PC if they actually drew it themselves. Master list of inspirations. I would love to see an index in this game that included all of the creators' inspirations. I know that a number of them are mentioned in the quick start, but it would be cool to see a full media list, and potentially very helpful to GMs and players too. So that's Helluva Town so far. It's shaping up to be a really unique and well executed but esoteric RPG. The artwork and thematic execution and the writing is pretty phenomenal, and frankly, I'm impressed with the ultra-light card draw mechanic as well. The mechanics kind of make me want to reskin the whole game with some other theme, if only to capitalize on the simple elegance of the system. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game so far. I've left links down below. Thanks for watching. See ya.